So, hello there, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon to you, wherever you might be in the world. Welcome to the channel. If you're a returning visitor, welcome back, of course. Now, as always, before I talk about the crystal today, I'll just run through, I guess you may as well say, the housekeeping, really, if I was delivering something face to face. Look, bottom line is, if you're new to the channel, you won't be aware. Although I do a transcript, I have my notes, I tend to go on a bit of a waffle from time to time. And for those reasons, I put timing stamps into the description so you can jump to the area of interest for you, because I know time is a premium for everybody. The other thing is too that sometimes there can be some inconsistency in my audios, and this is because I stop and start. So I apologize in advance for that. A lot of that is because actually I have a dog, or hopefully I won't have the problem with this recording, but today I've been experiencing a few audio issues, shall we say. Anyway, so there's a bit of stopping and starting that goes along. But the other thing that I want to mention for the newbies is I do this content as part of sharing information, my knowledge. It's not always 100%, sometimes I might learn more information as time goes along and I'll put that information up. But at the time of doing the videos, it's basically the information that I've got to date. Some of it's based on personal experience, some knowledge that I've gathered from other people. But for the purposes of doing the video, when it comes to the technical stuff like mineral information, I tend to rely on research. I'll go and do a bit of research first. So anyway, where I'm going with this is do your own research if you're interested in a crystal. If you find information different to what I've put up, by all means come back, make a comment. Or if you're familiar with the crystal, if you've used it, if you've got experiences with it, we love to hear that kind of information. I do anyway, because it helps to, grow that pool of knowledge. The only request I guess I would make to people is if you find anything useful on my videos, can you just give us a thumbs up? Because that helps me to stay motivated with making the content, because sometimes it can get a bit mundane for me, to be honest, but I try and keep a format there. Anyway, without further ado, I want to thank you, firstly, for being part of my journey today, and I'm just going to jump straight into the video now. So, of course, as you would have gathered by the thumbnail, we're talking about CROCOITE, if I can pronounce it, CROCOITE. Now, CROCOITE is absolutely stunning as far as I'm concerned. You can see here this rich vibrancy of the colours. Now, I've got different images as we go through it because it's actually very rare, and from what I understand, it's only found in Tasmania, Australia. So, of course, what we're looking at in this image is a specimen. Now, they're not points that we're looking at, because if you think about points, they have the form point at the end. So I'm really actually not 100% sure of what we would call these shards. To me they look like shards, but they're particularly beautiful. They're very well formed, and what we've got in this image is a really I would imagine to be high grade specimen, because you've got this transparency and the vividness of the color, which of course is orange. So a lot of the information that I'm putting up today is based on my own interpretation and understanding, I guess, of colours, healing, crystal, that kind of thing. So you may have a different viewpoint, but a lot of the time when I work out what a crystal will work on what chakra is actually colour-based. And so when we look at CROCOITE, it's got such a vivid range of orange to it. But if we think about the colour mixing, and we're talking about the power of colour, and this is the power of colour underlies basically all the energy because it's associated with the light rays. I'm going off on a waffle here right from the get-go. But yeah, so any orange crystal is going to carry elements and properties of the base chakra and also of the yellow chakra. And I guess the darker the red aspect, the more associated it's going to be with the base chakra attributes, and the lighter and more vibrant the orange, then we're looking to draw in the yellow. So it would depend, if you were lucky enough to get some CROCOITE, it would depend on the color range as to which chakras it's going to work most with, obviously it's going to be with the sacral chakra, but those extra attributes of whether it's going to bring in the solar plexus ones of faith, hope, trust, that kind of thing, and whether or not it's about building survival, direction of will, vitality, and that kind of thing. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to jump on now to what I perceive to be an overview of the attributes of CROCOITE. And I've decided to call it a stone of empowerment. And this is because part of empowerment, where empowerment is associated with the yellow chakra, that's your seat of personal power. That would be debatable in itself as well, but it's confidence, okay? And overcoming of any experiences of betrayal and being a victim and that kind of thing, that would be yellow chakra. Excuse me while I have a cough. Sorry about that. Okay, so the journey towards empowerment is one that basically is dependent on self-control. Okay, so we have to learn to control our emotions, and this is in the orange chakra. So what I consider as really an empowering factor of CROCOITE is that it's going to support emotional healing. And when we talk about that, we're talking about that non-reaction to triggers, learning how to manage our reactions, and instead of becoming volatile or reactive or even overwhelmed emotionally, we learn to actually create positive outcomes from some of the challenging experiences. So to some extent, it's associated with impulse control, strengthening the willpower, the desire to make the positive change, and to build really solid foundations for spiritual development and growth. And that includes, I say this again and again, if you want to have reliable and consistent reliability, I guess, or accuracy of your psychic gifts and your intuition and all the rest of it, then you've got to have the really solid foundations. And my perception is that CROCOITE will help to build those very solid foundations for building and opening and activating the higher chakras. Now, when it goes to the Zodiac, this is, if you're a returning visitor, they already know my viewpoint on the Zodiac and the links with crystals. I've got to put a disclaimer in here. For this particular crystal, I actually feel this is fairly accurate. I'll explain why in a moment. But if you're new to the channel, I'm a big believer in you don't let your star sign dictate what crystals you buy and what you won't. And that is the same, even though I can see the relevance of the association between CROCOITE, Aries and Scorpio. It's because basically if you're drawn to it, if you feel that you need it as opposed to you want it. I mean, I look at it and I think I really want it. I'd love to have CROCOITE as part of my collection. I'm not an Aries or a Scorpio, but I can actually see how it would be beneficial for me. But anyway, getting back to it, because it is so emotionally focused as far as the healing attributes go, because of the depth of this color, the vibrancy of the CROCOITE. Aries, for most people that know your star signs or your astrology and that kind of thing, Aries is a fire sign. Now, fire signs do tend to be fairly passionate, as in they might flare. I've got to say, in my experience, though, of Aries, I've never seen the really super flammable ones. I've never seen the explosive Aries, but I say that I've got a son who is on the cusp of Aries and Taurus, and he has the capacity to flare, but he's not a grudge holder, and it's all over and done with fairly quickly. And I tend to find that with most Aries anyway. So perhaps rather than restrict it to Aries, let's just say fire signs might benefit because of calming the reactions and helping them to create positive outcomes from whatever their triggers are. Now, Scorpio is an interesting character because they certainly, while they're not a fire sign, they're a water sign, but they do have an aspect of fire within them, because if you think about the scorpion, it does have that barb to start with the tail. And the saying that they have about scorpions is that when they're not stinging other people, they're stinging themselves. And that basically means that they're either flaring and reacting because they've been become upset by something somebody has done, or they're beating themselves up after the fact because they lashed out when they felt, in hindsight, that it wasn't necessary. So either way, let's not restrict it to Scorpio. Let's say that water signs tend to become very emotional, and so the CROCOITE might benefit them by helping to calm those emotions and getting them to put them in balance and perspective rather than reacting to the triggers. So, just a reminder here that I am not a geologist, I'm not a mineral expert. I do the research for the mineral content for these videos, and this basically informs me and hopefully you, so that when we start trying to buy a bit, that we can establish we're buying the real deal, or as we say in Australia, the real McCoy, and that we're not paying for something that's been misnamed. Now, in the case of CROCOITE, I actually haven't found any that are for sale, but given the fact that it's so rare and scarce, I would imagine it is quite pricey, because anything that is scarce, the price tends to go up for them. And this is one of the reasons why I think it's important to know what we're buying. So, in the information I got about CROCOITE is that it is a very soft mineral, okay? What we're looking at in this image here is basically a whole heap of prickly type shards on a host rock. The colours can be orange, red, yellow, or orange, red when it's got the light passing through it. Transparency wise, it's not opaque, it's always, apparently, and I'm open to correction, transparent or translucent, meaning that when you hold the torch behind them or hold it up to the light, you're going to be able to see through it. It does apparently have a shiny and reflective type luster to it, and as you see here, lucky I did the slide before I started doing the video, apparently you can find it in Russia as well as Australia. Now, the important thing too here, as far as CROCOITE goes, is knowing the fact that it does have toxicity to it in as far as it contains lead, and I'm not sure what hexavalent chromium is, but either way, it needs to be handled with care. We'll talk about the care stuff later on. But you certainly would be wanting to really look after your CROCOITE if you were lucky enough to get some. Now, when it comes to the buying tips, this is once again where I've received conflicting information. One of the sites that I visited said that you can actually get CROCOITE on the market coming out of Brazil, China, and Canada, and the US. But the bottom line is, I actually haven't seen any. That doesn't mean that it's not out there, and I don't know how reliable the source is that I found as far as giving the information. What I also found was one site saying that some of these very fine specimens, which could be the specimen that we're looking at on the right-hand side, that they're selling for US $10,000. So we're not looking at small biscuits when it comes to buying CROCOITE. However, I want to point out too that I've put this image up the top on the left-hand side where we've got CROCOITE growing. This is the top image on basically a black rock. Maybe that's lead, I don't know, but that would be the host rock. Anyway, so I would imagine that type of specimen is probably a lot more affordable because you've only got, well, let's be straight really. When we look at that rock, you don't have a lot of CROCOITE growing on it, and the shards are not particularly great specimens per se. It looks to me as though they're all very small and tiny. When you look, however, at the bottom image, which is not wolfenite, actually I'll be doing a video on wolfenite, CROCOITE that's been cut and polished, to get that to gem quality and to be able to put that in a setting, you're going to need rather a substantial piece of CROCOITE. And of course, to get it to that quality and transparency, that would be premium prices, I would imagine. So I guess the biggest tip that I would be giving here is, because of the cost, make sure you buy from somebody that is reputable, because you want to make sure that if you're paying for CROCOITE, that's what you're getting. I'm not even going to worry about giving the other tips because I just can't see that you'll be able to buy CROCOITE on a platform. But if you did, same old. Make sure you know what you're buying, get some good photographs of it, make sure you do your currency conversions and all of that kind of thing. So as far as the spiritual attributes go, I've already mentioned the fact that it is associated with the solar plexus, the sacral and the base chakras, but it's believed to activate both the sacral and the base chakras as well. A lot of the spiritual attributes will actually come from the color healing properties. So it is believed to expand a person's perspective, and I guess that is to see situations beyond just their own initial response, shall we see. When we talk about perspectives, we can talk about it from a physical aspect, which of course is in tandem with the spiritual aspect. Okay, so trying to think how to explain this. Okay, the expanded perspective means looking at situations from the perspective that one of emotional detachment, shall we say, to get the clarity of vision, clarity of information. And when our vision is clouded by emotions, we actually aren't able to see the big picture. So by managing the emotions, which we've got on the other slide as well, that enhances our capacity to see through the eyes of the creator, shall we say. Other attributes associated with CROCOITE is past life stuff, and that's reclaiming and healing. Now, of course, you could use it for your previous lives, but at the same time, where I reckon CROCOITE would be very beneficial is if you, say I'm in my later years now, and perhaps I'm, somebody like me at my age, we can look back and reflect and uncover issues from our childhood, say that we can work on to heal those and pave the way to a clearer future, if that makes sense. From a subconscious perspective, this business of uncovering and unlocking any karmic patterns, that's the stuff that we tend to look at and go, I just keep repeating these mistakes again and again, or I don't know why I'm having these really challenging experiences. And there becomes unlocking of the karmic patterns means learning why, you get to understand why you're going through a certain experience. And they tend to, when you do reflection, you can actually look back and see how these patterns are recurring in different ways. Anyway, I've gone on a waffle. It's said to promote faith and trust in the divine, also believed to support developing more reliable intuition, which is that clear judgment, and that's the part of the expanded perspective where you remove your bias and your reactivity, and instead you learn to rely on your gut instinct. Your gut instinct actually is not your sacral chakra, just so you know. If you're ever trying to develop your gut instinct and you're asking yourself questions of, is this going to have a positive outcome, and you get butterflies in your stomach, right? And I'm talking about the pit of your stomach. That's a fear-based reaction, and that is not gut instinct. However, the yellow chakra, your solar plexus, is the one that is your clear knowing, okay? So just a little bit of a tip there. Anyway, so CROCOITE is believed to motivate and inspire creative solution finding if you're having to address problems. Also believed to attract prosperity, wealth, and abundance. With all humour, you probably need to do that if you've just paid $10,000 for a specimen. But anyway, moving on. If you are in the dark, shall we say, about what your life purpose is, it's about finding the passion, finding your passion for whatever it is that you feel drawn to do. So that's your drivers, your driving force, and your motivators are going to reveal your life purpose. So you can see here there's a really wide range of physical metaphysical attributes. Now, I've got to do the caution here as well. Remember, there is no evidence to support that crystals are going to help you with your physical health conditions. However, there is evidence, as I understand it, to support the fact that our emotional state is going to impact and influence what's happening within our internal physical mechanisms. That stress, for example, is going to give you perhaps liver or adrenal problems, and escalate any heart and cardio problems a person might have. But anyway, just remember, if you've got concerns about your health or you've got pre-existing health conditions, see your doctor. In most instances, working with a crystal is not going to do any harm. Of course, if you're going to work with CROCOITE, if you can afford it, and you just wouldn't work with it while holding it on your body or anything like that. Anyway, back to the physical attributes. It is believed to promote right brain activity. Now, you wouldn't expect that off the cuff, really, if you're talking sacral chakra type stuff. But when we're talking about emotional impulse control, that is a brain activity, because there is that link between the power of thought and the power of emotion. And if we're going to unpack and heal the emotions, we're also repatterning the brain, shall we say. So it's going to promote that inner reflection on what it is that creates our emotional reactions. It's also believed to be beneficial for the circulatory system. You can see here that the claims of cellular regeneration and oxygenation, blood purification as well. If you've got issues with your diet or digestion or eating or anything like that, even if it was an eating disorder, CROCOITE would be beneficial based on the fact that it's in that it works with the yellow and the solar plexus, the yellow and orange sacral and solar plexus chakras. It's supposed to support work-life balance, any issues around reproductive organs and health. It's believed to benefit. If people have got problems with their immune system, yep, absolutely, it would be recommended for that. Also, actually, we're not looking at the emotional slide till the next one, but if people have got metabolic disorders and even mood disorders, quite often that is an imbalance between the sacral chakra and the throat chakra. So if you suffer from an immune system disorder, where I'm going, you might want to actually be working with, if you were lucky enough to get CROCOITE, CROCOITE sodalite perhaps, because that's associated with the throat chakra and it's also got neural repatterning going on there, and even something purple or white for the crown chakra. If you've got sleep problems, you could put it beside your bed, and it's also recommended as a treatment for people that have got problems with waste removal, such as their bowel, kidneys, and liver. I'm not going to go into all of the emotional attributes because there's so many of them, because of course CROCOITE is focused on the sacral chakra. But what I will say is that the shade of the CROCOITE on the thumbnail is very much associated with promoting a person's capacity to feel joy, joy and happiness. But at the same time, to be able to get to that joyful state, it is a case of removing fear and being able to learn to sit, well, in the first instance, to discern whether or not the fears are based on flawed thinking or if it's based on a reality, So, if you go to the beach, using a prime example because I'm Australian, and we see online a lot of the time people saying like, oh, I wouldn't swim in the beach in Australia. Well, for us Australians, we can't think of not swimming in the beach. But when we go down to the beach, we're not frightened of going to the beach. Most of us aren't frightened of sharks, because I say that in as far as, because although there are shark attacks and things that can happen to you in the ocean, they're actually quite rare. We've got a lot of beaches, and it's probably over-reported. So we go in there knowing that there is a risk that there may be a shark around, but we also know how to manage those risks in most instances. Surfers, if you know the surfers, many of them will turn around and say, well, if that's how I go, that's how I go, but I love surfing too much to actually take on board the fear or the risk. So they're quite fearless when it comes to that. But for others of us, it's like, yeah, well, I'm actually not going to go swimming in shark-infested areas. And I don't care how big the swell is. My preference is not to go through a shark attack or whatever. So where I'm trying to outline here is that there are fears that are well placed. There are fears which are figments of our imaginations or just escalated. And then sometimes it's a case of there is a risk there, but navigating and negotiating, I guess, those risks to minimize any chance of harm. So anyway, that's what the sacral chakra works on. And that's part of managing the emotional responses and reactions to things. Because if we don't, there's other sayings too, feel the fear and do it anyway. It depends on what the fear is. If it's a fear of sharks and you're going swimming in shark infested waters, then I say, it may be best to stay on the shoreline. If you're going to a beach where, sharks are a random occurrence, well, make sure it's not crocodile infested. It's Australia. What can I say? You've just got to keep yourself informed and educated and manage the fears and the risks. So either way, I've just gone completely down a waffle there. So getting back to the actual properties of CROCOITE from an emotional perspective, it's going to help overcome thoughts of victimization. It teaches, I guess, to be responsible for the choices that we make, and I've sort of outlined that with the emotional fear-based responses as well. Definitely it would be a great crystal for doing reclaiming your inner child if you've had childhood experiences, for want of a better word, and you need to reclaim that, perhaps child abandonment, child neglect or whatever, to basically connect to that aspect of yourself, to bring healing into that. And to fill your body with light. Anyway, look, I'll wait for you guys to leave a comment rather than me waffling on here. As far as suitable uses go, okay, we've looked at some of the images where the CROCOITE has been carved for setting in a pendant or, some form of jewelry. You could wear it on your body. I imagine that they would put a seal on it to prevent any toxic whatever transfer from the crystal to your body because of the setting. But regardless of that, because it's such a soft crystal, I really don't think that I would want to be wearing it as a jewelry item. And in fact, I probably would want it in its natural specimen state as opposed to carved in jewelry. And if I was fortunate enough to have some, I definitely would consider putting it out in the environment, whether it's the lounge room. If I had a healing room, I definitely, if you're a metaphysical worker and you do healing treatments, it would be very beneficial, I would imagine, in your treatment rooms. If you were going to meditate with it and you wanted to hold it, because there's different ways of doing meditation. A lot of people will hold a crystal and either lie down with the crystal over, say, their sacral chakra, if that was the area they were trying to heal or whatever, or alternatively they might sit in the yoga pose and hold a crystal in their palms, which I don't think that you need to do. But if you did do, then you would want to wear cotton gloves or keep a barrier between your skin and your crystal specimen. But another way that you could do it is actually eyes open and just focusing your attention on your CROCOITE specimen and just focusing on your breath and just allowing the crystal energy, if you like, to go into your body. Other ways might be to use it as part of gridding if that's what you're into. But anyway, by all means, as I say, please leave a comment and let us know how you use it or how you might use it if you were lucky enough to have some. Just a reminder, you would absolutely not be using it as a water immersion elixir because of the toxicity, because it contains the lead. So this is funny, okay? So when I say this is funny, this is one of those things that as I have been reflecting and putting together this video and doing the audio, it is coming stronger to me about happiness and joy. And so my message associated with this is that these are personal choices that we make. We can choose to go through our life reacting to external triggers and stimuli, or we can choose consciously to build something positive from whatever it is that we're experiencing. And that includes things like your impulse control, your mood control, getting some balance in your life, and all the rest of it. So for me, I'm going to say the message for CROCOITE is basically life is as joyful as you want it to be. You can be as happy as you choose to be. It doesn't matter what's going on in your world. You can still be happy, if that makes sense. I hope somebody can make sense of it. Anyway, there's plenty of books to talk. If you don't understand what that means, there's a book I read years ago, which was Creating Happiness Intentionally. And as I recall, the author had been through some pretty extreme challenges in his life, but had reached the point where it was like, I'm not going to let the past dictate my future, and I'm going to choose to create consciously the life that I desire, I guess, which is inner peace, harmony, and happiness. But I would say more than anything else that when it comes to CROCOITE, we're not just talking about, a happy state, we're talking about a joyful state. Crystal care is going to be pretty easy for your CROCOITE, because the bottom line is it's so soft you actually wouldn't be really, I wouldn't, you might be different. I wouldn't be using it for very much, actually. It would come out on special occasions, and when I'm not using it, it would be in a cabinet or a, one of those, depending on the piece, the size. I can't remember, specimen boxes or something like that with clear, so you can see it, but it's protected from dust and the elements, definitely because it's got a colour to it. It's got such a vibrant colour. If you wanted to retain that, you would not expose it to harsh light, certainly harsh sunlight that we have in Australia. So yeah, I would be keeping mine protected, because I actually really wouldn't want it to pick up dust, because it's got all those shards and points on it and all the rest of it. Even if you get those, I can't remember what they're called, but it's like an aerosol and it just blows at your specimens and blows all the dust off. You can use them on your keyboards, that kind of thing. Well, I would probably use that as a last resort, but ideally I would protect it from getting dust anyway. From a metaphysical perspective, as far as charging, recharging, clearing and cleansing and all the rest of it, if I'm keeping it in a specimen box, yeah, I'm saying if, because I don't have any. I'd love to have some, but I don't. Then I would probably pull it out before I want to use it and place it on selenite or something like that to clear it and charge it and get it ready. And I would probably do the same thing at the end of it. But if you don't have selenite, yes, of course, you could use your incense, if that's what you're into, your sage or your essential oils. It's not the kind of crystal I think that I would be wanting to put out in a full moon. I just wouldn't want it to be exposed to the elements, to be honest. But it would be one I would consider taking outside. If I didn't have a selenite plate, I probably would consider placing it on the earth in the garden, if it's one of those nice specimens that we've looked at here, just to allow it to recoup with Mother Earth energy. But if you've got some ideas or suggestions, please let us know. Leave a comment. So, my friends, that is the extent of my information on CROCOITE. I am going to wait to hear from people, to hear what you've got to say, inviting you, thanking you in advance. And I am going to close off for today because I've got some more tasks to do. And I will say, have a wonderful day, wonderful week. Catch on, if I can speak, I can't speak. Catch you on the next video. Love you and leave you. Bye-bye for now.